Um, welcome everyone to our session on creating the neuro-inclusive classroom. This resource has been over a year in the making, and I hope that in the next hour you really get a sense of what we hope to achieve. So, what I'm going to do now is just basically talk through some of the issues that we're going to be covering. We're going to look at, first of all, a bit of introductions. I'll introduce my panelists in a minute. We're going to orientate you. What do we mean by neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and invisible disability? Um, we want to look into the eyes of our neurodivergent children in our learning communities. And I've got some chilling statistics to share with you. There's huge pressures on children today. There's pressures on school leaders and teachers today. um, and what we want to do is create some kind of unifying but not uniform solution to help you. We call it creating a neuro-inclusive classroom. And we've got four aspects of that, which we will talk through with you today. So that's what's on the cards. But what I'd like to do now is introduce our panelists today. Um, Starting with me, Marius Frank. I'm old enough to remember playing tennis during a free period in the summer term with the head of PE. That's how old I am. Back in 1982, 83, when there was time to play tennis. So let me just go over to my co-head of education, Nick Ponsford. Nick, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Nick, or Dr. Nicole Ponsford, as I should be calling myself now. I am co-head of education with wonderful Marius Frank, and my other hat is I'm the founder and CEO of the Global Equality Collective, and I'm passionate about inclusion and technology. Thanks, Marius.
Absolutely brilliant. I'd like to now introduce Angelina from SSAT. Angelina, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Angelina Idun, and I have worked in the sector for over 35 years as teacher, as school leader, and now I am one of the directors at SSAT with the School Students and Teachers Network, and I lead a brilliant team of people who design and deliver all of our professional learning activities, school improvement support, and membership activity. So really delighted to be involved in this discussion this afternoon.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Sharon Gray. I first came across Sharon working with youth justice services across the country. But Sharon, please, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, all. Good to be here. So I'm Sharon Gray. I've been in education my whole life, apart from the 1 year that I was excluded. Might find out more about that another time. Then I was a head teacher for 22 years, and the majority of my headship has been in special schools, both SEMH, primary, secondary, day schools and residential. I was inspecting for 9 years, just learning about great practice in other settings and taking that back into the schools that I was working in with and leading. And then I was member of the Youth Justice Board for 6 years, really sort of taking a strategic lead about a child first approach and developing our first secure school. Great to be alongside you all this afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Sharon, superb. Thank you so much. So I'm now going to go to the presentation. I'm going to try and keep it quite precise, and I will be inviting some of our panelists in as we go through. Nick is going to be looking at the questions and answers, Q&A. As this is the webinar, we can't invite people to actually be on screen and speak on this one. But see this as the start of a conversation. If you have any points to make, any reflections, we would love to hear it. Nick will be monitoring that traffic as we go forward. Okay, so let's kick on then, and we are going to start the learning journey. We're going to start with definitions. And I think so many words are out there, so many descriptions are out there. I will just share what we mean and what we stand by. One of the most challenging aspects I think, in education today is a simple fact that not all disability is visible. And we have names for some of these conditions. We have autism, Tourette's, dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, and others. We've selected some of the top 6. Now, looking at an individual, these disabling issues, and the word disabling is a moot point. We can talk about that as well. But some of these are invisible just by looking at a person. And do you know, I think one of the critical aspects of the human condition is the fact that we're all different. We are different heights, different weights, different hair colors, different postures, different biochemistry inside us. And that level of difference also includes our amazing brains. We can give names to all of these different functions, these different aspects of brain activity. And we are all different in our combinations of skills, of competencies, if you like. And we have weaknesses, maybe perceived compared to others in other areas. But that's the human condition, isn't it? All of us haven't got the eye and hand coordination of a sports person. Some of us are incredibly reflective. Some of us have an amazing ability to notice emotions in others. This is neurodiversity writ large. But some individuals have what we call invisible disability. And let's take an example which is relatively well known, and we'll call it dyslexia, a difficulty to learn to read, write, and spell accurately and fluently. What people might not know is that there's at least 4 distinct different types of dyslexia that might come individually or in combination. But let's start off with dyslexia. Now, if we take this variety and variation in human function, we can represent that on a spectrum. And let's just label the extremes of that spectrum: no observable or measurable dyslexic tendencies, all the way to some adults and children who can be severely dyslexic. Now, if we plot the human condition on that extreme range, all of that is encompassed by the word neurodiversity. That is neurodiversity writ large in terms of, if you like, dyslexia. Somewhere on that continuum, we can test or screen or assess for dyslexia. I've drawn a little box in the middle there, coming to that in a moment. So if we had the whole of humanity and we plot them out on this graph, the majority of individuals might have no observable or measurable dyslexic tendencies, and we call that the global majority. But there will be others, adults and children, who, in progressively less and less numbers, struggle with learning to read, write, and spell accurately and fluently. Some slightly, some at an extreme level. When a condition becomes a barrier, we call that neurodivergence. Neurodiversity is the whole of humanity. Neurodivergence is when individuals perhaps have that need when compared to the global majority. But as you see, there's a box in the middle here, because there may well be children and adults in your classes, in your schools, who have been undiagnosed and unassessed. And we call that hidden needs. I hope that explains what we understand as neurodiversity, neurodivergent, and hidden needs. Now, we're looking at this whole model from the perspective of children who are ND, neurodivergent. Okay, so it's not the global majority. We're looking at the rest of that spectrum. What's interesting when you look at the figures is that 75% of children who have SEN support or EHCPs in schools, 75% are neurodivergent. Dyslexia, autism, ADHD, or other neurodivergent conditions. That's quite a large proportion. But let's drill in now. All right, this is children with identified SEN. Yeah. What about young people in that hidden needs block with unidentified SEN? It's interesting. The British Dyslexia Association asserts that 70% of learners with dyslexia go unnoticed in schools. 70%. Why? Well, some of them are compliant, beautifully well-behaved children. They don't know, they're not noticed. Actually, some of them try to blend in. Some of them might have what we call a spiky profile. They may compensate for a weakness in reading by being tremendously skilled at oracy, great listening skills. They can argue, they can create. I am seeing that in my 8-year-old granddaughter who has dyslexic tendencies. But when you talk to her, it's like talking to an adult. Some young people will mask their weakness. The pressure of that can lead to meltdowns in occasions, and in some incredibly worrying cases, it could lead to mental illness even in teenagers. The pressure of trying to fit in. We've drilled in further. We've looked at neurodivergent children and absence from school. And we've got figures here. When you get the PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on the hot links I've embedded to go into the individual reports. At the moment, 1.6 million children are persistently absent from school. And according to these reports, 2/3 of the children who are persistently absent from school have EHCPs or are on the SEN support register. This doesn't count 300,000 children not on roll. So given the prevalence of neurodivergent children with EHCPs and SEN support in cohorts, it's likely that a significant number of these children have neurodivergent needs. It's even more concerning when we drill into suspension and exclusion rates. The last set of results that have been published, which was for 2023, 2024, logged nearly 100,000 suspensions and over nearly 11,000 permanent exclusions, which if you divide it by 192 school days, that's nearly 5,000 a day. Children on SEN support and with EHCPs are greatly overrepresented in these figures. And that's not all. It is very likely that many children with no identified SEN do in fact have neurodivergent needs that have not been recognized or identified. It gets more concerning when you look at collisions of disadvantage. When you take into account the impact of abuse, neglect, poverty, deprivation, substance misuse, mental health issues, disruptive family connections. For some of these young people, they might not even realize they are neurodivergent. They might learn to camouflage difference behind layer upon layer of front. They may be hyperreactive to threat because of their, if you like, adverse childhood experiences. And, well, sometimes a lack of self-control due to masking a meltdown and this hyperreactivity to threat can lead to some children already in difficulties making things worse for themselves. And sadly, and I think this is a bit of a national disgrace, the majority of young people entering youth justice pathways have degrees of special educational needs. And then if you look even deeper, a colleague of mine called Dr. Alex Chard did a deep dive into 80 children who had committed crimes or were the victims of severe crimes across the West Midlands. Just look at those collisions of disadvantage. I haven't got time to go into this, but it's quite chilling. We also need to consider what children are saying to us. And I'm going to stop my presentation there, and I'm going to bring in, first of all, Nick, to just say something about those amazing figures, the actual authentic voice of children. Nick first, please.
Thank you. So this is where I swap hats and I talk about my doctoral research and the real world model that is the GEC, the Global Equality Collective. And as a school leader and as a child myself, where school was my safe place, I've been obsessed with the question, why aren't schools safe for everyone? And so my doctoral studies have been co-designing a way of looking at the multidimensional experiences in school. So I've to date surveyed 12,500 members of staff and 22,000 young people as well, aged from the age of 3 to post 16. So the slide I think you're going to show in just a moment, Marius, illustrate some of the data that we got from the summer, which was where I put a pin in my thesis and my doctoral studies. And this information has been collected from the young people. It was designed with 50 student councils from around the world, and I did additional work alongside my work at Bournemouth University with Goldsmiths, and have designed something called kaleidoscopic data. And it's that, as you were saying, Marius, that kind of clash together of multitudes of lived experience all intersecting with one another. And kaleidoscopic data is a way of looking at our people not just through a single lens, and it's making sure all the shapes fit, but through anonymous self-identifying surveys, which are outside of MIS systems. So there's a psychologically safe space built in. We've been able to learn the following things. So the young people have told us that only about a third of them feel that, well, if we flip that around, a third of our young people strongly disagree that teachers listen to their perspective compared with non-SEND students. This then illustrates a lack of trust that they have, and something that's very important, which is called social capital, which is how we have trust and we make connections and we have relationships and friendships with others. They lack that, and where they lack that trust, they're more likely not to attend school. We can see that 21% of students with self-identifying invisible disabilities strongly disagree that their needs are supported in classrooms. We also feel that they have a lack of voice, and when we compare that with some of the more privileged young people, for those, for example, who have never experienced low socioeconomic status, there's a huge equity gap there. These students as well also feel invisible in the curriculum, and if we roll that out nationally, our data illustrates that's almost 3 million students nationally. Again, we've got more information if we roll in that out about that disagreement that their needs are supported and they feel included in the school environment. And where we know the DFE and Ofsted, which are going to get to, are talking a lot about achieving and thriving. Unless our young people have that sense of safety, unless they have they feel trusted that they can be themselves and have a voice, unless they feel that sense of belonging, why on earth would they be attending our schools and absorbing our lessons, is what I say. So I think we have to listen to what they're saying.
Thank you so much, Nick. Angelina, can I come to you, working with nearly 2,000 schools? Do you feel that this view of neurodivergent children is really understood, not only just by policymakers, but also by maybe clusters of schools heads? Or do you think this is a new challenge or a new way of looking at the challenge?
Well, it's funny actually, because when I was just reflecting on what connected me to this launch event today, it took me way back to when I was 17 and I got my first kind of job working with children and young people on a summer play scheme for children whose families had been referred to social services. And then when I did start teaching, I used to work Saturdays at a West Indian Saturday school. And we didn't have the language of neurodiversity then. And, the wealth of sort of research and things that you have done and that others have done, that just didn't exist. But when I look back, it was absolutely clear that the kids that, I was working with on those Saturdays in those holidays, they just didn't fit the way that schools were expecting them to learn. They weren't, as Nicole says, they weren't thriving. They didn't have that sense of safety and belonging, not necessarily because of lack of potential or lack of ability, but because their needs weren't being fully supported and fully met. And those experiences stayed with me. It's one of the reasons I got into teaching in the first place. And those experiences stayed with me. And also they were experiences that continued throughout my, career in school as teacher, as leader. And I just think that's why what you're doing here is so important. That idea of just, helping schools create classrooms where every learner can succeed every day. So I think there is still a real need for us to make sure that, teachers and leaders are truly equipped to meet the needs and support such a diverse range of learners that we have in our classrooms. And I think, I'm finding that whether I'm talking to teachers, to school leaders, to family members, to friends, so many of us are, I suppose this resonates for so many of us, the children in our own circles who are struggling with the learning environments in which they find themselves. So I just, the figures you've presented there, Marius, yeah, absolutely staggering and chilling. And, it tells us that sense of urgency that we need to have to address and some of these issues.
Thank you so much, Angelina. And finally, Sharon, who working in the space of youth justice services and seeing this almost like influx, a flow of children that is unrelenting, who've gone through the system with these complex patterns, if you like, of disadvantage. But underlying it all seems to be neurodivergence. I'd love to have your perspective.
Yeah, I think again, what comes to mind is how just shocking these figures, these statistics are, and the time is now. There's such an urgency to this, and I think it takes me back to when I first joined as a member of the Youth Justice Board, and the first thing that I wanted to do was to speak with the children within the system, and so I was lucky enough to be able to arrange some visits into various different settings, and it didn't matter whether it was Felton or Wetherby or Warrington. When I sat with the individual children, young people, and had conversations, it was almost as if they'd gotten to a room and devised a shared script, a narrative, because the stories that they were sharing were almost so incredibly similar. Now, of course, they hadn't had that opportunity. They were up and down the country and never met. But the reality is that their trajectories, their stories were very similar in exactly that we're talking about. Marius, Nick, Angelina, that we know that some of these children, without judgment, were born into situations where perhaps poverty, discrimination, where needs perhaps weren't met as effectively for whatever reason. And then as a result of that, the impact on the developing brain and body going into schools, and children do well if they can, and if they can't, then we need to be alongside to support them, to enable them to do well. But of course, this is where these children started to experience exclusion, isolation, and then isolation and exclusion from school, permanent exclusion, which then led them into all sorts of different ways to try to survive this the experience that they were living through, which has led them into then being in custody, being in prison. So it's almost these children that need the most love, that sometimes have asked for it in the most unlovable of ways, are being punished because of their previous experiences. And I can't but fail to be shocked that, you know, that's still the case. But I know this is what brings us together in our journey. And we're working with adults in schools who I know feel this, care deeply. And it's just, how can we make this happen?
And I feel it all links back to invisible disability. When you look at a young person and they present a behavior that might not conform or be expected, immediately I will call it bias. Our bias is that behavior is anti what we want, and therefore, isn't it funny? We teach children to ride a bike. We teach children to if you like, play the piano. We teach children a subject. Do we teach children, you know, about their behaviours and how they behave, where their behaviours are coming from? Oh, I better carry on with the presentation, but thank you all for that. Okay, so look, I'm going to whisk through the next section because I think it's important that we get on track again. Now look, what we also know, and this is aside to neurodivergent children, we're talking about all children, as well as the neurodivergent children. I don't have to rehearse this slide. The pressures, the social and emotional pressures on all of our young children today is quite extreme. Exacerbated, of course, by social media and online life. But let's not think that our children are immune from knowing about the cost of living crisis, the impact of poverty, bullying and abuse they could get, discrimination and marginalisation, the impact of international war on communities and the way we communicate that to children. It's extreme. It's extreme, leading to unbelievable figures. Nearly 1 million children being referred to children and mental health services in the last set of complete statistics. 8% of the child population. Anxiety is a common reason for referral, and we just simply are very poor at meeting those needs. Now let's think about our schools, our leaders, and our teachers today. I put that up because I got triggered. I got triggered when I saw the new Ofsted framework, and therefore I did something on social media. Can you inspect inclusion into a school? I personally am not sure you can. So I am at odds with the government, and I'm at odds with Ofsted, because I think inclusion is an emergent property from everything that goes on below. But we can talk about that at the end. But there is a relentless focus on schools at the moment, with Ofsted using words like inclusion, belonging, and thriving as accountability measures. There's the impact of artificial intelligence, with Ofsted saying the biggest danger is to do nothing. We know about the white paper. We know about the direction of travel now. The noise it's generating is colossal. But I saw a report yesterday from Office of Finance and Standards. Despite additional cent funding, the budgetary restrictions over the next few years on schools are, in their words, going to be severe. So how are we at Microlink? And with these wonderful people I've got on the call, are going to respond. Well, about a year ago, we proposed, based on the data that you saw, that we could come up with a model for a neuro-inclusive classroom. We shared it during Neurodiversity Celebration Week, which is an international event, and we thought some people might be interested. We had 7,000 individuals registered for the webinar. We didn't get all the people on the webinar, but just watching the counter flying up frightened the bejesus out of me. But it showed the interest in our model. And so for the last 12 months, we've been refining it. Today marks the launch of creating a neuro-inclusive classroom. We want it to be practical. At the moment for schools, we want it to be affordable. We want it to be scalable. We know that our model aligns 100% to the ambition and intent of putting children and young people first, and the implications that flow from that white paper. The resources are ready now for the here and now, so that, if you like, the firmest of foundations are laid for any further DFE-directed professional development. As you know, part of the government strategy is additional training and send. As if schools for the last 20 years have not done additional training on send, but no, maybe I'm different from government there, but maybe there's some more stuff. But we need to lay some firm foundations perhaps that cover off not just send, but also childhood trauma and also emotional anxieties. We want to take the immediate professional development burden off the shoulders of centrecos and senior leaders. By goodness, they're going to have their hands full creating the capacity for strategic planning, medium-term and long-term planning. That's what we want to do. We want to reduce the cost and the burden of supporting staff. And we are absolutely wedded to the principles of universal design. So if what we propose works for neurodivergent children and staff, we want everyone to feel the benefit of it. Those are the principles behind the neuro-inclusive classroom. We began our journey 3 years ago, and at the end of this presentation, when we ask my colleagues to reflect on it, Nick is leading this initiative now for Microlink. We won 2 DFE contracts to place assistive technologies into mainstream classrooms. So that's things like screen readers, text to speech, speech to text, and some of it is just amazingly free and built in, but we don't know about it. But as you can see by some of these quotes, parents were noticing the impact, trainers were noticing the impact, and we now have a mature program of study for teaching assistants and teachers. We call Be That Teacher, with the AT in that cunningly disguised to indicate assistive technologies. So that was our leading source. It's going so well, we probably handled about and shared this with about 400 schools, and progress is being made. We want to get to another 4,000 schools in the next couple of years. But then we thought, hang on, we're doing agency, we're helping independent learning. I wonder if there's more we can do further down the Maslow triangle. This, I think, echoes my interest. Before I went into teaching, I was extremely fortunate to have done 6 years of neurobiology research, brain research. I didn't want to become a leading world authority on deaf mice, so I went into teaching. But it really struck me there's some neuro fundamentals that are, if you like, missing pieces, that if we get those missing pieces right, then teachers will have those firm foundations from which they can build out their understanding of hidden disability, their understanding of neurodivergence. So we decided that if we created some resources which helped to develop a foundational knowledge of how the brain grows, changes, and learns, then maybe, just maybe, a critical component of behind a wide range of school improvement strategies, ranging from trauma-aware training through to neurodivergence, through to helping children with mental health and emotional well-being, through to one of the biggest challenges for schools, understanding where behavior is coming from. And the social and emotional challenges that go with it. Maybe, just maybe, if we created a resource to address these, a foundational resource, then maybe all schools could benefit. And that's what we've done. And we call them neuro essentials. Neuro essentials. These small building blocks that could change teachers' minds. We want it to be slightly different to the way CPD curriculum professional development is done today. We hope that your inset days do not look like that. A 2-hour PowerPoint simply will not change the world. And sadly, we seem to be wedded to that in education. The other factor is, it is impossible for someone to stand up in front of a set of professional colleagues and influence behavior through a directed program. So we've thought long and hard, and we've adopted a different model for change management. And that model is called emergence. You can look it up on Google, you can look it up on AI. But emergence is a theory of change where leadership sets clear goals, measurable outcomes, and accountability really tight, but embraces a variety of starting points. Small micro nudges which encourage self-interpretation in very knowledgeable professionals, focusing on narratives. And we call this micro learning steps, small step learning. What these small steps will do is produce a cumulative learning through curiosity, through instilling insights, through motivating goal-oriented behavior, producing that behavior change and culture shift that I think will make the biggest difference, rather than policy and practice. So we've produced a series of online interactive learning, if you like, vignettes that illustrate what we feel are some of those neuro-essential elements. These are standalone. We gift these to schools so that every member of staff and governance can access the training in their own time. It can be directed and, if you like, shaped by leadership, or it can be just seeded into small step learning, individual, small group, or whole staff, to make those micro nudges happen. I was amazed to see the new 5 priority areas from the DFE coming out, one of them being something that some people called executive function. And guess what? We've got a unit already in our program. We've anticipated well where things are going. We also have developed coached training programs. Be That Teacher and Be That TA are our flagship ones, and this term we are launching Creating a Sense of Belonging, Emotional Mastery for Service Leaders and Building Resilience in an Age of Anxiety, courses that I hope hit the zeitgeist of the time. And I'm looking forward to the autumn term, because the people on this call are going to help construct new courses. I'm looking to Sharon to help me devise a course which we call From Trauma-Informed to Trauma-Transformed Practice. I'm looking to Nick to help with creating that digitally accessible classroom, an outgrowth, if you like, of Be That Teacher. And Angelina has got incredible strengths and experience in coaching, and we're going to bring that forward in the training. And there will be more. Working with a lady called Denise Wise, who runs an amazing provision. She used to look at high potential children. She's now produced a book called Supporting Dual Exceptional Children. This is children with high learning potential and SEND. So we have got some great stuff planned. Also, we offer our schools in our community of practice an insight into emerging AI and AT tools that can transform the impact on young people. We have a research and development department at Microlink who are working with developers all across the world and bringing some amazing cutting edge innovations into schools. At affordable prices. And this is so important for schools. They want advice and guidance on what works, but they also want to be affordable. And as you can see, when you get the PDF, we've just had one on Dolphin for the visually impaired. We've got a fantastic one coming on the 18th of March on Inspiration, which is a mind mapping tool, which now is available and passed by JCQ for GCSE and GCE examinations. And Nick's going to be leading one on the 25th, looking at AI, developing media literacy and thinking skills in an online world. So that's also going to be part of our offer. Be that teacher, what's new in AIAT, Neuro Essentials, and full CPD training. This is what we're launching today. What do you want to do? If you want to join in, well, please just get in touch with us. And we are offering this to schools at an absolutely unridiculous price of a subscription rate that equivalent to about £18 a month. We know what it's like to lead schools. We know how tight budgets are, but that is what we want to do. When you get the PDF of this presentation, well, just fill out the expression of interest form. We've got links to our website, which we'd love you to explore. And basically, there it is. And basically, we just want you to be involved and part of our community of practice. So, look, that's me done today. I'm so glad I've got time now to share reflections with my colleagues. If you have any questions or queries, please use the Q&A function. In the summer term, there's going to be a couple more webinars which are more interactive where people can put their own thoughts. So I'd like to come to Sharon first of all. Sharon, trying to unify, if you like, those underlying principles of if you like, neurobiology, the neurobiology of being, if you like. I know you've done some incredible research into things like Porges' polyvagal theory, how emotions are managed and things, but it can be quite a step for individuals to just take that on board. Do you think these sort of neuro essentials might lay that foundation to help people on that journey to understand where behavior is coming from?
I absolutely do. And we have the evidence of this where we're doing this work, as you know, Marius, Angelina and Nick, in schools already, the transformational impact that enabling our adults and our young people to really understand the neuroscience of learning and the biology of stress. You know, it's almost what happens to our body. We go through puberty. We're taught about that. And so we can preempt and plan and manage that sort of in the best way possible. But are we really taught about our internal systems, our stress regulation systems, and those sensations, and enabling us to kind of almost name and tame and potentially take control and agency of those aspects? And working with schools, I'm in Nottingham today, working with schools that are taking this approach, the impact that it's had on inclusion, the impact it's had not just on the children in terms of their outcomes, but equally on the emotional well-being of the adults as well, because they're learning alongside. And so I think, as we've said, the scale of need has been overlooked for too long. Transformational change demands this bold systemic response. And I think the way that you've scaffolded, the way Microlink is scaffolding this, is so accessible. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm a trained emotion coach, and working with Emotion Coach UK, big plug for them. Fantastic organisation, fantastic resource. What they found was that following the emotion coaching training, which was aimed at improving their practice with children, made the adults more aware of their own emotional states and feelings, and helped them as parents as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank you for that, Sharon. Angelina, you've worked with schools for time. Do you feel these fundamentals might support the, if you like, the next wave of inclusive practice?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to pick up on, the training that you're doing and how you are incorporating coaching into that as well as a way of kind of changing mindsets. And I think sometimes when people think about coaching, they think about kind of just the individual. Yes, it's about the individual, but longer term, it's also about the organization, and it's about kind of, system-wide change as well. But yeah, in my mind, as someone who's really passionate about what the power of coaching can do, I can see how that can make a difference in a number of ways. The idea that mindsets shift through reflection and not through instruction. So training is all good, and giving people a sense of what they should do. But actually, what we all need is that space to explore, like, I suppose, why we're doing it, to reflect on those experiences, to put things to the test in a very sort of safe, non-judgmental way. That's what drives real change. Coaching kind of creates a sense of ownership as well. So when the solutions are starting to come from staff themselves, from teachers, from leaders, from other staff, that's when change starts to really stick. That's when it starts to become really sustainable. It's not just a quick fix. And coaching builds that flexible thinking. So it's exactly what you want to do, isn't it? When you're talking about working with neurodivergent learners, children, and neurodivergent adults within our school communities as well. One size definitely doesn't fit all. So we need to be thinking about different approaches to meet the needs of that whole range of individuals. And through
Absolutely.
coaching, what you're doing is you're bridging that theory into practice as well, and you are building the much needed capacity that we need within our schools, within our
Oh,
systems as
thank you,
well.
Angelina. Yes, I mean, for me, schools that might one of the tools that people often say is you've got to celebrate difference. You've got to celebrate difference in the school to make the school more inclusive. Okay, um, but you can't celebrate difference if you don't understand where difference is. And so the idea of this approach is that if you really do understand neurodivergence, if you understand that, that will drive tolerance and that will drive compassion. And if you have tolerance and compassion at the heart of a school, you will get inclusion. You know, thank you for that. And Nick, you often talk about barriers to learning, about dropping the curb and making it accessible. That is one of the fundamentals we want. We want to drop the curb in the classroom to make the classroom more inclusive, because you have removed barriers to learning. Nick, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because it's one of your strong suits.
Well, I think, we're very much of a time, aren't we? We know that, when schools came into being in 1944, it was about the acquisition of knowledge. We know we've got all that information in our hand or in our pockets now. So schools need to be doing something different. And we also know that, for the last 15 odd years, that actually the strive to put Bloom before Maslow about, students being vessels for learning to increase us up the, PISA scores has had a huge knock-on effect. And I'm grateful for the focus, I think, on inclusion, because the system hasn't been working. A system's definition is a series of working parts. It has not been doing that as an education system. And when we think about our state school system, it should be serving our society, and this is what our society looks like. We should not have schools that are getting rid of our most vulnerable members of society, and I think a focus on this by school leaders, by the system, of supporting our youngest, most vulnerable and most underprivileged young people is what it needs to be, but we need to do it in a different way. Coaching works. Research shows that coaching is the best thing that leaders can do in terms of progress of their organisations. And I think the focus we've had on cognitive science for the last few years, actually, you know, we as teachers know we need to focus on learning, and what better way to do that than to understand the differences between the neuro majority and neuro minority, and having, as you say, you know, an empathy for people who think differently to us. But as you know, as professionals, our job is to treat our young people with respect, to unlock their potential and give them the opportunities that, you know, school gave me when I had the backdrop that many of our young people did. So yeah, I think this is very timely, Marius.
For me, whenever I talk to inclusion, I call them inclusionistas, you know, the people who passionately believe in it. I went to a wonderful conference run by The Difference just after Christmas. The room was filled with people who are passionate about inclusion. When I work on social media, I put out something, get loads of yeses and shares and likes and all that, but I'm feeling I'm talking into an echo chamber. Now, we have to. It is absolutely incumbent on us to take this message out into schools and school communities where perhaps this message has not been heard yet. No criticism, because it has come from pressure on the system, but there's still schools out there that, because of the policy and practice within those schools, in exclusion is, if you like, an emergent property. As we know, there's been a lot of talk about one strike and out binary behavior policies that perhaps are used inflexibly. And teachers who have, if you like, clung on to a model like that because it works for them, will find these first steps hard. And one of my motivations behind the Neuroinclusive Classroom is to give them just a few little vignettes to help move them forward. I don't think also the language that is sometimes used by the inclusionists is helpful. Whenever I hear the term all behavior is a form of communication, it makes me wince. How can you stand in front of a professional body where some of those teachers have been physically and emotionally traumatized by behavior and say all behavior is a communication? It's simply not appropriate. We have to help those colleagues move forward. Go to you, Sharon. I mean, I know I've bounced on occasion in a training session when I've hit the wall of silence, when I look around the room and the eyes don't have it. How about yourself? Do you find that sometimes we've got to work through a conceptual barrier before we can communicate that message?
Again, for me, I go back to the science, and absolutely, it's kind of to facilitate the experience for our adults to get a sense of the communication. There are signals in our body that if we can interpret and learn how to interpret, we can identify and manage far more effectively. And I think that for me has been almost the light bulb moment. And when I'm working in school setting, you know, it's really giving that sort of experiential understanding and learning, linking to the research that is the science that really illustrates all of this, so that we can't not take this approach. This approach isn't about lowering standards. It's just reimagining how we meet them. So our sensory aware classrooms, trauma informed staff, and so on. It's that neuro-inclusive practice, and which will absolutely transform lives, so and disrupt the injustice that we're currently seeing. But yes, it is doable, and we're seeing fabulous settings across the country who are in the midst of it and are doing it and are achieving significant.
Fantastic. Angelina.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, yes, we have the science of it, and we have the research of it. So much of this is just about being human, as well, and about kind of when we talk about mindset shifts, it's about cultural shift as well, isn't it? And Marius, you talked about sort of values and principles at the start of the session. And, each time we face challenge, personally or organisationally, it's always important to go back to those values and principles that underpin what we do. So I think, whatever has happened, might have happened up till now, the thinking needs to be about, we can, take this, use it. We've talked about sort of taking the burden off already pressured, staff in schools, and releasing them from that by giving something that acts as a valuable tool, a resource, to start making some of those changes. But I think the way in which we encourage, our schools, our leaders, to adopt this resource and this approach needs to continually just be underpinned by those values, those principles, and that idea of what it is to be human, and what it is to kind of be ready to support everybody that comes through the doors of our kind of schools, no matter what their starting point, no matter what their background.
Totally, and I often say to schools that have binary behavior systems, I say, look, it's okay to have zero tolerance if it is matched by 100% compassion. It is possible. We can move the world forward. Nick, finishing off, what any final thoughts from you, please?
Well, I think we're at a stage where we know that we are the first generation of educators with a backdrop of AI and a kind of new future and automation. And I think the most savvy and most ethical leaders at the moment are seeing that means that actually then we have to really lean into the lived experience around what it means to have, that social capital, those human interactions, and how we can do that for the betterment of one another. So, this is uncomfortable. This is new ground for some people. But I think with the backdrop, Ofsted inclusion is a separate category. I know that was challenged by some, but they did make it, because actually inclusion isn't threaded through our schools properly yet, and it is not evidenced across the board. So hopefully with this brave new world we're moving into, which isn't 100% brilliant, but it is a step in the right direction, that if you don't have the ethical case for it, I think there's a business case for it now for leaders as well. So very timely, Marius.
Well, guys, thank you so much. We have done what we've done in the allotted hours. Thank you to everybody out there who has stuck with the 60 minutes. We hope it's resonated. We will send you a recording. We will send you details about how to join the program. We're keen on partnerships. We're keen on partnerships like we have with SSAT. And if the partnerships flourish, we are absolutely keen to offer as much as we can for as little as possible. We've had a question come in. And how does what you're doing fit in with the government's 22 million funded PINS program, which has not been reported to date to have been very successful? And it goes on to say only 21% of leaders felt that this training fully addressed their priorities. Anyone familiar with PINS? Because it's something I'm not quite familiar with myself. Well, I'm going to look it up, and Miss Bell, I'm going to contact you and continue that conversation, because there's training. And there's training, yeah. There's lots and lots of different sorts. We are setting our stall out to help from the ground up, and understanding, if you like, the biology of being to go beside the policy and practice of doing. That's the best way I can describe it. And I often say it's in the eyes of the teacher. And I hope we've got your eyes and ears and your minds to the direction of travel we're going in. Colleagues, thank you so much. Sharon, Angelina, Nicole, thank you so much for your inputs. When we stop the event, it will stop dead. But please, the conversation will not end. We'll be in touch, and we hope you will join our program as we move forward. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, and goodbye.
Microlink Education, home of the Neuroinclusive Classroom.